Good morning, and thank you for joining us with the WellMed Charitable Foundation Caregiver Teleconnection Program. Today's topic is healthy living for your brain and body, and we have Dianne Teran as our speaker today. She earned her undergraduate and graduate degree in social work from Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio, Texas, which is also the city where she was born and raised. She has worked in the field of aging for over 20 years, beginning as a facility social worker in long-term care. She spent 17 years with the Alamo Area Council of Government, Area Agency on Aging. She held several positions with the Area Agency on Aging, from direct case management to Caregiver Service Coordinator, overseeing the agency's national family caregiver support and health and wellness programs. She has been with the Alzheimer's Association for 6 years. She serves as program manager with the San Antonio and South Texas chapter, working with communities, families, and those individuals living with Alzheimer's and all other dementias to provide education, support, and resources. And with that, Dianne, take it away.
Thank you, Minerva. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate the WellMed Charitable Foundation for inviting me to present today. And thank you all for being here. So before I share my screen, I definitely wanted to kind of preface, I think I don't have a slide for it. I think you all, those that have the handouts, and hopefully again later, those that came on a little bit later, will get them. But this kind of really supports the association. Of course, we do a lot of research. Our goal is to find a cure for this disease. But really, the movement now, the lifestyle studies, right? We don't have a cure, but really looking at what we can do, this kind of recipe, right, of healthier living, what we can do to reduce our risks. And earlier, the Alzheimer's Association had their international conference, and results came out from a study, a 2-year study that was being done called the U.S. Pointer study. And it was, again, a 2-year study. For those in the Texas area, Houston was the closest area to us in San Antonio that had a cohort, but there were over 2,000 older adults across the country. And they were in two different groups. There was a structured lifestyle and there was a self-guided lifestyle. So basically it was self-guided, was just given, right, some instructions on what to do. And then the structured was really given, right, some really directed. They had navigators, they were followed up on, and there was these really specific areas they worked on: physical exercise, health monitoring, nutrition, and what we're calling cognitive exercises. And so it really showed over those 2 years. Again, the results came out earlier this year, just really showing at a level of 2 years, right? Gaining 2 years in their age. So kind of reducing their age by 2 years in these lifestyle, this recipe. So again, right, the science is showing these lifestyle factors, what you can do. So I just really kind of want to share that. Again, there's some things that we shared in handouts. And ALZ.org. You can look up the U.S. Pointer study. It was actually written in an article to the JAMA Journal about that. So I just want to preface that because this is, I think, kind of what I'm going to talk about today is really, it's science-based. Again, I am a social worker. We have these amazing, wonderful scientists that do these research and look into this. So again, the Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body is really looking at those science-based recommendations for that. So that being said, I'm going to share my screen here for our actual presentation today. All right. Okay. So again, I am going to move forward here. I'm going to reduce this so we can, oops, sorry about that. I'm going to stop share again. Okay, there we go. Minimize that so that's okay. All right. So hopefully today, by the end of this presentation, the learning objectives that you'll be able to identify certain behaviors that affect our brains and bodies. There is a list for healthy decision making. So I think obviously, right, there's a lot of areas that we can help to improve our health, our brain. But these are some 7 areas that we're going to really focus on today. And I'm hoping too that, maybe there's either some changes that we can start to make, or for some of you all that I hope that, you are already doing this and it's kind of going to be that, right, that validation that says I'm on the right track. I'm doing the right things, just to continue to motivate you to really look at that, right, and to continue to do that. There was a handout too that was shared. As Minerva mentioned, if you want to just jot down, right, some, again, those things that just really, again, if you haven't thought about it, some of those changes that you might make, think about in those certain areas. So again, throughout the program, you're going to hear some tips, some strategies, and some of those recommendations in these areas, right, from sleep, smoking, mental health, physical activity, balanced nutrition, cognitive engagement, and social engagement. And first, of course, like a baseline, because as the Alzheimer's Association, right, we deal with this brain disorder, this brain disease. So we really want to talk about, right, what does that mean? What does that look like? What's the importance? So, right, we're talking about one of the most powerful, right, organs in our body. The brain is the control center of our entire body, right? It manages everything, including our thoughts and movement. There's approximately 100 billion nerve cells or neurons creating those branches, right? That network in our brain and our body, signaling everything, right? From forming our memories, our thoughts, and our feelings. And many diseases can affect the brain. So for example, right, when we talk about Alzheimer's disease, unfortunately, it progressively destroys those brain cells, right? It moves throughout the brain, affecting the functions, the diseases as it progresses. So, right, that importance of knowing what's happening in the brain. We know this is not a normal thing that's happening as people age. It is that brain disease, right? But I always think we talk about equating it to, right, I think of the engine of a car, right, that it basically, right, it's telling your entire body what to do. When that engine of your car stops working, right, that brain, when it's being affected and damaged, why we see those other things that are happening in people's bodies, right, as this disease progresses, right, which is so devastating. So we're looking at that. And you'll hear a lot during this presentation, this heart-brain connection. What you do to protect your heart can also help you protect your brain and keep it working at its best. So we know that the heart and the brain are connected. That's what's good for the heart is good for the brain. And now basically the science is telling us that so that we can do things that to maximize our health. So basically, really, and the reason why, right, we're seeing that is basically the brain is nourished by the body's richest network of blood vessels, right? The oxygen and other elements that are delivered to the brain through the bloodstream that keeps us nourished. So I always think this is amazing percentage. So every time your heart beats, 20 to 25% of the blood being moved goes to the brain. Right. So think about that, right? Every time your heart beats. So all that good, right? All those good nutrients, that oxygen that's flowing through is going to your brain. So that's what's keeping, right, in good working order, fueling your brain. So definitely, or why we say, right, what's good for your heart is good for your brain. That's just, yeah, I always think about that. That's just an amazing percentage of thinking why we need to make sure all of that is good flowing, right? All those good things that are flowing to our brain. And we do, I know it's usually when I'm in person, we'll kind of do this. I can't see you all, so I'll kind of just, right, we'll cheat, we'll say an answer, right? Alzheimer's is a normal part of aging. We know that that is false, right? Although we know that it is a progressive, fatal brain disease. Symptoms, right, get worse over time. Age is the biggest risk factor, but that does not mean, right, that it is a normal part of aging. So, and another one I think that's common, we kind of do a baseline, right? We use, and we tend to use that interchangeably when I'm out talking. You'll hear Alzheimer's, right? You'll hear dementia. Alzheimer's and other dementia, right, are not a normal part of aging. And what is the difference, right? Are dementia and Alzheimer's, are they the same? Dementia is not Alzheimer's. Dementia is a general term that we use to describe problems with thinking, memory, mood that's severe enough that it's interfering and affecting a person's daily life. It's what we call a collection of symptoms, what you would equate to like heart disease, right? There's so many causes of heart disease. Same thing with dementia. Dementia is not that diagnosis in of itself. And so what could be causing that dementia? Alzheimer's just happens to be the most prevalent. About 60 to 80% of individuals that are diagnosed with the dementia have Alzheimer's related dementia, the type of dementia it is. Alzheimer's, again, is the most common dementia. Again, there's no cure. However, there's been some drugs that have helped either right the symptoms, and now we have a couple of drugs that are really showing really great progress in slowing the disease itself. Right. So again, just I like to baseline that as well, because that can be confusing when we tend to interchange those. But there's again several, and those of you that may be either familiar or know some of those other dementias, vascular dementia, you may have heard dementia with Lewy bodies. Right, there are many causes of dementia. So that dementia is just that general term. And then, so, right, we want to look into that. So what is the story of our health, right? So we want to talk about what affects our overall health and our well-being, right? Many factors can impact our health, including our genes, our family history, our environment and lifestyle. So, right, as we age, it's common for us to experience some similar changes, right? So those things are great, how we our hair may gray, how we wrinkle, right? Needing glasses for reading. But how that happens to us is very different, right? We also use kind of what we call those modifiable factors and those non-modifiable factors, right? Non-modifiable factors tends to be genetics and family history and environment, right? I can't change the way my family history, I've been graying, can't see it. I like to go to the hair salon, you know. I've been graying since I was 16, right? That is genetics. I cannot control that, right? Some people, when you look around, you're going, why? Gosh, you know, you don't have so many wrinkles. That's genetics, right? Again, we cannot control. Sometimes an environment too, right? We cannot control where we were born, right? Certain areas we were born in, right? Those are, again, those non-modifiable factors. Today, we're talking about those modifiable, right? Those things that maybe, you know, we can have some control over in our habits and the things that we can, right, have some control over. And so, you know, we want to look at kind of those numbers, right? Those the history. So I think too, right, when we talk about hopefully, right, we go to the doctor, we get that testing done. We want to look at, right, the numbers, right? It's always good, I think, the physical part, right? We want to look a certain way, right? We want to weight. We'll talk a little bit about that, right? We see that in the chart here. Weight can have a factor in that when it has to do with blood pressure, right? Those things like that. But people can have a certain body type, right? And their lab work and those numbers can still be good, right? They can still be bad, but it's really looking at what are those numbers, right? What does your blood pressure look like? What is your blood sugar, right? Your A1C, your weight, right? Does have, it can have a factor in that, and cholesterol. I will tell you, I always share personal things too. Sometimes family history, those non-modifiable factors. You know, I have diabetes, hypertension in my family. It runs in my family. You know, I wasn't doing the best to kind of push that aside. For a while, I was put on high blood pressure medication because mine was weight related. It's genetic, but there were factors that were modifiable that I could work on. But I then decided that I wanted to work on that, and I worked on my weight and got off my blood pressure medication, right? So again, those things that we'll talk more about that we can hopefully, that recipe, right? That thing that we can do to reduce those risk factors, and looking at then working on that we'd say is also good for the brain, right? So we talk about, again, the science, right? And what the science is telling us, that those factors that increase the risk of heart disease and stroke may also increase the risk of cognitive decline. Again, remember, right, those things that are affecting our heart are then potentially affecting our brain, because what's good for the heart is good for the brain. What's affecting our heart is also affecting, right, potentially our brain. So, right, hypertension, diabetes, midlife obesity. Although diabetes, we do say that because I have heard like people ask us, well, is diabetes right? That we say it's correlation. If you heard like correlation but not causation, it's correlated. There could be some risk, but there's not a direct cause. Like the science isn't telling us there's a direct cause yet. I mean, they're not saying that. But like anything else, right? These things have a factor in those risks, right? Midlife obesity. So good cholesterol, right, is good for the heart. Because right, the better your heart is pumping, remember that 25%, if your heart is pumping well, all that good oxygen is getting to your brain, right? So just looking at those things, making sure, right, what the numbers are telling us when you're going to the doctor and you're getting all that lab work and you're taking a look at that, what those things are. And then this is just another knowledge check, right? So like anything else, right? Why we do these presentations to all ages, right? It is never too early or never too late, right? To start healthy habits, incorporate them, whether you are doing them now, you continue to do them, or you feel like, gosh, maybe I'm not doing them so well. It's okay, right? It is never too late to start to make those changes. So now we're going to get into kind of these 7 areas of really looking at what the science is saying that has kind of really affected the quality of and the kind of this recipe of our healthy living for your brain and body. Right? So the quality sleep, being smoke-free, taking care of your mental health, get moving, eating healthy, challenging yourself, and staying connected. Okay. So the first one that we're going to talk about is sleep. Gosh, this is the one I am challenged with the most. Sleep is essential, we know, right, for our overall health and well-being. Not only does sleep allow us to rest and recharge, but it also affects our ability to maintain healthy blood pressure and control diabetes. So again, those of you that may struggle with blood pressure and diabetes, the science is showing that a good sleep is affecting that. Inadequate sleep due to conditions like insomnia or sleep apnea can cause problems in memory and thinking. Of course, obviously, we know sleep apnea is a more concerning issue. So if you're having issues with that, we definitely recommend please talk to your doctor, right? Because we know that is a breathing, right? People stop breathing with a sleep apnea condition. So that definitely, right, is a concern. But really making sure that you're getting that adequate sleep, right? When we are sleeping well, you're waking up, right, with a clearer mind, right? And that ability to think clearer, right, when you're getting good sleep. And so the recommendations are that adults should aim for no less than 6 hours of rest a night. Of course, there are some things that could interrupt your sleep, right? I know sometimes, again, as we get older, we have to get up to go to the bathroom, right? Some of those things. I think, the idea is that if you have to get up, right, but are you able to go back to sleep, right? Get back in bed, go back to sleep. Or like once you're up, right? I've heard people like, well, once I'm up, I forget it, right? I can't get back to sleep, right? That's a concern. Or, are there, how's your environment, right? Are there noises, other factors that are making it really difficult to sleep? So, right, your sleep, what we call like your sleep hygiene, right? Thinking about your habits. Do you get enough sleep? That quality sleep as well, right? Again, what kind of environment helps you sleep? Is it the temperature, right? Again, is it I have to have it pitch black. I have the dark, what is they call the blackout curtains. I can't have like a little sliver of light disturbs me, right? So I have to have it really, really dark. My parents love having it like a freezer in their house at night. That's what helps them sleep, right? So again, thinking about what kind of environment helps you sleep and how you can minimize disruptions, right? Keeping those things in mind for that quality of sleep. And again, right, just thinking about those tips for sleeping, right? Thinking about just your own area, right? The noise, right? Blankets. I mean, right, there could be a whole thing, right? A whole idea of your routine of sleep. We also talk about too, that's why safe sleep is challenging for me. Electronics, right? Some of y'all may have heard that where they recommend, right? You should not be on your phone, your iPad, right? At least half an hour before you go to bed. I'm so bad at that. I don't watch television a lot. I tend to watch streaming things on my iPad. So, right, getting off your electronics before you go to bed, right? Again, that good hygiene, a routine. I think many people can tell you what they do, right? A routine in the morning when they wake up. But what is your actual routine when you go to bed? If you have one, amazing. Think about that. Do you meditate? Do you have quiet time before you go to bed, right? So again, just thinking about those and how important it is for sleep. So just that area. The next one, again, this isn't too large. Hopefully there aren't too many people that are smoking, but we know this is right. This has a direct impact on your brain health. We know it is a challenging habit, right? It is tough, just like any other habit. But we know that studies have found that smoking increases the risk of cognitive decline and increase the risk of dementia. The benefits of quitting smoking include a lower risk of heart attack, stroke, and lung disease, right? Better circulation, right? We know that's right. I think that's the science, right? Where smoking, your vessels, right? It tends to constrict your blood vessels. So again, remember thinking back to all that good when your heart beats, pumps, all of that blood that's going to your brain. But when your vessels are right, we have vascular issues, then that good oxygen and that blood isn't getting properly pumped to your brain. Right, the issues with smoking that can cause those circulation problems, and that's causing right the less oxygen and things that are getting to your brain. And quitting smoking can reduce a person's chance of developing that cognitive decline, later on down the road. Or as opposed to non-smokers, right? So if you're currently a smoker, really thinking about what could help you stop. If you don't smoke, obviously, right? Please stay smoke-free. And again, maybe, finding those resources that are available online or in your community. There's a lot of places to look at, resources to find those smoking cessation programs. Again, I know it's not easy. Again, like any other habit, it is hard to break, but really looking at, professionals, doctors, again, those programs that can help you with that. So again, we don't spend too much time, but, we know that is something that people still are doing, but that is still a concern and has that effect on your brain health. So the next area, again, I think another big, and we, I think more recently, right, in more recent years, we have talked more about, always don't talk enough about, but it's so important, is taking care of your mental health, right? Really looking at, so those areas of, do you have a lot on your plate, right? Maybe you take care of others. I know with, WellMed, the Charitable Foundation and their caregiver SOS, right, working a lot with family, primarily with family caregivers, right, making sure that there are those things in place that help caregivers with their own stress levels, right, taking care of themselves. Maybe you're juggling a heavy workload. Right, doesn't mean just professionally, right? Your families take a lot of work. Are you dealing with unexpected surprises, right? And we know that it's not just, right? It doesn't have to be bad things, right? Moving, having, new grandchildren, right? New babies. It's not all right negative. It can be positive things, but that's still stressful. Changing jobs, right? But making sure that you're paying attention to your stress level and symptoms, right? That can come along with that. So anxiety, depression, other mental health concerns, right? Those things that affect the health of your brain. We look at that too, because there's a lot of things that we talk about. We have a whole presentation on that, Alzheimer's and dementia, where there's a lot of things that can mirror that. Depression is one that very much mirrors. It may not even be Alzheimer's and dementia, but depression, right? Those symptoms can very much mirror those of someone that may have Alzheimer's and dementia, but it could be someone going through depression, right? That very much affects, right, your mental health and what you're going through. So really, right, we just encourage talking to your doctor about how you're feeling, or talking to someone, right, that hopefully you have someone that you can talk to about how you're feeling both physically and mentally. And some of those healthy habits really that we're talking about is that self-care, right? And what that means for hopefully, it's going to be part of it too, right? This all ties in together. That regular physical activity, right? That decreases stress, increases your ability to manage stress and overall mood, sleep, increases your mental health, right? Again, all a good full circle, right? So when you're sleeping better, when you're engaged in physical activity, right, it's all contributing to your hopefully better mental health, right? So they all affect each other, right? So really then thinking about, again, if you're not doing it already, what are some things that you can do to take care of yourself, especially if you're taking care of others? If you have a full schedule, really, right, what are things that are going to make you successful, right? Again, I know WellMed used to do a lot of their stress busting programs, which I love. We want to be successful, right? I know that in my life, if I say, oh gosh, I'm going to walk an hour a day every day, that is not realistic for me, right? It's not going to happen. And if I think that's going to do it and I don't do it, I'm going to feel bad about myself. I know me, right? So maybe it's, I'm going to walk 30, 45 minutes, every other day. That may be realistic for me. And the more I am successful at that, right, the better I feel. And then I'm just going to keep doing more and more, right? It's going to make me feel better. So, right, you want to take those small steps that you can incorporate into your life, right? And you don't want to make it any harder for you, right? You just don't want another thing on your plate. So can you build in those small things, right, that are going to boost your mood? Maybe it's, right, listening to your favorite song, taking a quick 10-minute break, right? So there's things that how you can focus on your self-care, right? Again, these kind of little tips, right? Maybe it's taking a nap. Gosh, I remember, I think we got away from those when we were little and you were in school and you purposely, right? They purposely put you down for a nap. I want to keep doing those at work. No, right? Then we just take a 15-minute nap. I say we go for that. So, right. Or is it a walk, right? Is it just a quick little dance, right? Baking a treat, a healthy treat, right? Is it a movie? Again, a funny video, right? Are you on YouTube? Are you just sharing a funny video with somebody, right? Again, something that you feel is it incorporating into your life, not making anything harder or more on your plate, but that just gives you that little piece of, fun, something that makes you feel good, right? So thinking about those things, what can you do if you're not doing it? What can you kind of do to help incorporate that, right? And then, of course, right, it all ties in, kind of talked a little bit about it, get moving, right? That physical activity that can improve your brain health, right? So again, what is the research kind of telling us about that physical activity? So really the studies have found that consistent physical activity is associated with the lower risk of cognitive decline. So people say if people had to choose one thing to do to improve their brain functioning, it should be physical activity. So evidence suggests that physical activity may directly affect brain cells by increasing, again, right, that blood and oxygen flow. So it may also reduce other dementia risk factors such as high blood pressure and diabetes. Again, right, think about it, the more your activity, the more your heart is pumping, and that 20-25%, right, that your every heartbeat is pumping, right, that good oxygen, carrying all those nutrients, all those good things to your brain. So it's good for your heart, it is good for your brain. I'm going to ingrain that saying into your brains. You're going to keep saying that after this presentation, right? What's good for your heart is good for your brain. So again, most research believe that exercise should be regular and on the vigorous side. I had mentioned that US Pointer study and that physical exercise, it was pretty specific. They had like a 30 to 35 minute of moderate, what they called moderate to intense aerobic activity 4 times a week, plus strength and flexibility exercises twice a week. So that was pretty intense. Like I said, I mentioned with that was they're structured, but you can see that was like, right, they wanted it to be pretty vigorous to again make sure that the heart is pumping, that blood is flowing. Other studies have shown the benefits of even milder activity, right, such as walking or strength training, right, that there's really not a single recipe. And we also know too, right, that sometimes you have to modify, right? We know that physically some people can't, right? If you have certain physical issues, right, you definitely want to talk to your doctor about, right, what works for you in terms of what you are able to do, right? Even if you've heard of these are like memory cafes, we're hopefully bringing those back. I know there's other partners we have in the community that do those, even people living with dementia. And those exercises, they bring in like Zumba, yoga, and they even modify them, right? So chairs, right? Even they're in the chairs, they do the yoga, they do the Zumba, right? So there's ways to modify and still get some activity, right? But that still can hopefully get your heart pumping, but that works for you, right? And what you're capable physically of doing, right? So really thinking about, right, there's again, no single recipe, just thinking about what works for you, but making sure that it's a movement, right, that has a positive change that can help your overall health, right? And again, right, those suggestions on what activities, do you want to try? It can feel right a little overwhelming or hard to, add that movement into a full day, right? If you already have a full day, those little changes that can add up. Again, that 20 to 30 minutes of maybe walking a few times a week, doing activities that you enjoy, right? I love dance. I love all activities that can incorporate. That's why I say Zumba, any of those kinds of things I enjoy. It doesn't make me feel like I don't feel like I'm working out. I feel like I'm just dancing, right? But again, or right, a partner. Sometimes it's nice if you have a buddy, right, a friend that you can do those things with, and making sure again that you're incorporating that into your day, right, your daily routine, so that if it doesn't feel like it's just another thing added, right. So again, some of those tips. Find things around that you again already might be part of your day, walking around your neighborhood, maybe taking the stairs if you can instead of right the elevator, maybe parking a little bit further if you're able to, right, your physical able to, right, because those small amounts can add up, right, those fun things. Again, asking your friends, your neighbors, it's always fun when you have more people doing it with you in a group. But again, right, I always say that too, but making sure that you are right talking to your doctor about what works for you. If you have any things that you have to make sure, right, you take care of, or that you have to be aware of, right, physically, medically. Right? And then the next one is going to be, right, again, it all comes together, right, all around, is that eating healthy. So eating an overall, right, healthy diet, balanced nutrition can really reduce not just, right, in terms of what we talk about, Alzheimer's, dementia, but, right, a lot of diseases. So as we've discussed, again, what's good for the heart is good for the brain. It's the same when we talk about foods that we eat. So we know that healthy fuel for the body benefits the brain functioning. So eating a balanced diet may reduce the risk of right heart disease, cancer, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, stroke, and diabetes. Although, right, there can be different opinions. Right, I can imagine I see it all over, right, TV and lots of places, right? There's a lot of opinions on what we can do to maximize our health, but research on the relationships between nutrition and cognitive functioning is a little limited. There's not a lot of research, which I know that we have a lot of research out there that are kind of probably looking at nutrition, those kinds of things. And so two examples, actually I kind of tell about three. I had to look up one because that's more recent, that we do have a medical science team through the Alzheimer's Association. And actually amazingly got to our science officer, Dr. Maria Carrillo, was visiting us from our home office a couple of days ago, and got to hear her talk more about, in this US pointer, the MIND diet. But I'll talk a little bit first, which is a combination of these two. So the association talks a lot about the DASH diet, if you heard, and the Mediterranean. So the DASH is the dietary approaches to stop hypertension. So again, most people that have had right heart disease, heart attack, right, anything that's good for the heart, or the Mediterranean. So it'll come up here. So if you want to know what it's actually meant, the DASH diet. So right, those dietary approaches to stop hypertension, and Mediterranean diet. So they're just the recommendations, right? I know, again, there's a lot of things to look at, but these are just kind of the two that the association has been recommending for many, many years. So again, the DASH it's a flexible and balanced eating plan. So it really looks at reducing the risk of developing the cardiovascular disease because the DASH is a healthy way of eating. It can, again, lower the risk of many, many other diseases, osteoporosis, cancer, heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. The Mediterranean diet incorporates the basics of healthy eating along with traditional cooking styles, right? So you'll see here, right, those fruits and vegetables, nuts, beans, and whole grains, lean meats, fish and poultry, right? Those healthier fats, limited sugar and salt, right? But again, these are just examples. There's others. The important thing is to find a balanced option in the food that you eat, right? And the food that's important, right? Culturally, right? We know that food is a very social thing too, right? I know, again, I can speak personally in my family, right? Food brings us together. It is a very personal thing for us. If you are not eating several plates of food, then you are disrespecting people, right? You are not eating enough, right? So we have to make those changes. Sometimes, right, it's how we prepare foods too, right? If you can replace certain things, right? Sometimes the way we've learned to prepare foods, it doesn't taste the same, right? It doesn't taste right. But how do we maybe make those slight changes, right, that are a little bit healthier for us, right? Again, told you, I come from a family where diabetes runs rampant, and right, we are many of my aunts and uncles, my mom is diabetic, but having to learn, right, how to make certain foods with not using, right, pure certain fats, right? How to do those things, how to incorporate sugars, right? How to use certain things to replace. But right, that takes time to think about those things and how do you learn that way of cooking. Right? So, right, again, incorporating different fruits and vegetables into your daily diet. Some studies indicate that certain fruits, such as berries, may be particularly helpful and eating green leafy vegetables has been shown to have healthy benefits. But again, I remember I keep saying that too, but please, right, always say we know that you do definitely have to talk to your doctor, right? Because you may be on a medication. I know certain blood thinners, right, people are on where leafy greens, that's not supposed to be, right? You're not supposed to be eating certain green vegetables because of your medication you take, right? So definitely, it's easy to say, but having to be aware that you really should be talking to your doctor, right, about that. Eating nuts, beans, and whole grains, those lean meats, choosing foods containing polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats, which are found in nuts, plant-based oils. So again, all those good things. So right, it's never too late to adopt a heart-healthy diet. Studies show that making these changes even in later life can benefit brain health. And the one thing I will definitely just kind of share, I'm still learning about this. I'd mentioned the National Institute on Aging has a lot of good information. We should have some on our alz.org, but I mentioned our science officer, Dr. Carrillo, had mentioned and in the study, the US Pointer study, they had them using the MIND diet. It's MIND, but it incorporates both because it is the Mediterranean dash intervention for neurodegenerative delay. So that's why they call it the MIND. So it's basically a combination of these two diets. And so basically it's a hybrid of the Mediterranean and the DASH. So again, remember, and there's still studies going on because this part of nutrition hasn't been as well studied as other areas. So I think it's, again, more recent that they're looking a lot at, what's in terms of nutrition, what's beneficial. So again, I won't go fully into that, but that's kind of more what they're looking at is this MIND diet, this combination based on kind of more recent studies. And you can look a lot into that. It's really interesting, but looking at more of those kinds of things that are directly, is it affecting right, brain health? But right, anything, again, looking at this, anything that's going to help you, right, reduce those risk factors, work on those other things, hypertension, diabetes, right, making your heart healthier, right, is good for your heart, good for your brain. So all those things. So, right, those tips on, right, how can I cook a little bit differently and to make my meals healthier, right? What are the slight changes I can make? And I also think too, like, right, sometimes it's, right, it's always on the negative, right? We tend to focus on, well, what do I have to cut out? What do I have to stop eating? Sometimes we look at it as, don't think about always what can I cut out, but what can I incorporate more of, right? What can I eat more of? Can I eat more fruits? Can I eat more vegetables, right? So I just want to think about it in a positive way, right? It kind of makes my my brain think a little bit better, right? Not stopping certain things, which I can, or cut back on, but what can I eat more of, right? Those vegetables, those fruits, again, swapping things, and what things am I willing to try? I think that's important too. Again, right, culturally, we had an event, we had an education conference, and we incorporated Mediterranean food because it's on a healthier, right? And I was at a part of town, we kind of had a satellite area in a part of town that is more, right, predominantly Hispanic, Latino. And one of the ladies said, this is very different for us. Most people in this neighborhood wouldn't have tried this food. This is not what we're used to, but they really enjoyed it, right? So it's just being willing to try, right? You're not used to it. If somebody wouldn't introduced it to you, you probably wouldn't have tried it. But thinking about that, right? What foods am I willing to try? To think about of those that are healthier, right, in that realm. So just interesting, those kinds of tips, thinking about those things. And again, right, those substitutions that could potentially be made. I think, again, that focus on what you can add in, not that negative, right? Not always what we have to take away, what we don't, we can't have, but what we can add in, that positive, building meals around vegetables, beans, whole grains, right? Choosing those leaner cuts of meat, some of those tips, right? The fresher foods, right? Not always the frozen, or if they are, right? Sometimes those frozen things are good. Also cost, right? We definitely know consideration into cost of foods, right? So sometimes those are the options that we have, and that's okay. This is another one I think is so key. We get a lot of this sometimes too. I hear a lot of this when I'm working with not just older adults, many people. The World Health Organization concluded in 2019 that vitamins and supplements, should not be recommended for reduced of cognitive decline and dementia. But that's more of, I'd say a little bit more of this in that it's anything with supplements, right? I want to speak to more of, I think it's more about talking to your doctor. When neighbors talk to neighbors, right? Friends talk to friends of, oh, I'm taking this, right? This over-the-counter supplement and it's working so great for me. Or, you should take this. I found this over-the-counter. And just remember, right? Our bodies are so different, right? We all take different medications if we're taking prescribed medications, and what's working for your neighbor, right, isn't necessarily going to work for you. Or to understand that just because it's an over-counter, right, supplement, doesn't mean that it's not affecting your prescribed medications, right? So when your doctor says, please bring all your medications to your appointment, they mean, right, even though you're buying it over the counter, right, you want to take everything, right, that you are putting into your body. We have had stories of people that maybe their doctor is prescribing them like a vitamin D, right, because they have a deficiency, and they found a multivitamin, right, and it also has a vitamin D portion in it. So, right, that's affecting because they're then taking even more of that vitamin than need be, right? So just really, again, right, being a savvy consumer, really thinking about, just because it's over the counter, just because you can buy it, that, it can have, right, an interaction with prescribed medications that you're taking. And that if you see commercials, right, on television about medications that say it can improve your brain health, it's gonna, right, knock years off your life, things like that. Just please talk to your doctors. Call our, I think I'll leave you, there might be a slide on here. Please call our helpline. We have a 24-hour helpline with trained clinicians. You can ask them those questions. I saw a commercial that says this medication is going to help improve my brain. They will give you up-to-date information. They get great information on, is it true, or is it just, let's play some brain games, let's get things that are free, that don't cost anything, that can probably have the same type of effect as paying for something that has a cost to it, right? So again, we just say be a savvy consumer on those kinds of supplements and things that say that you may see those commercials and things on television. It's easy to say that. So again, right, challenging your brain may help lower your risk of cognitive decline. Absolutely, right? Challenging your brain may lower a risk of cognitive decline. But kind of what makes that, right, challenging, it's really, challenging your mind, again, can have short and long-term benefits. Really looking at, and more, again, that real kind of mental challenging, right? Keeping your minds active and challenging, learning new skills. We tell people, well, they say, I like to do brain games. I like to do word puzzles, or right, I like to do the daily crossword, because gosh, I can do that in 10 minutes. Well, if it's becoming that easy, right, it's not really challenging your brain, right? We want you to work on those things that are really keeping you challenged, right? Even if you don't get them right. I think people feel that way too. Oh, well, I didn't get all the answers, or it's taking me forever. That's okay, right? Because that means you're really it's challenging you, right? It's really making your brain work. That's really what's kind of, right, engaging. Or if it's something that maybe you're not used to doing, maybe you want to try, right, those new skills. Maybe you haven't really tried that before, but you want to try something new because it's engaging maybe that part of your brain that you haven't been using, right, before. Maybe you're more of a physical person, right, but you want to try more of a mind challenge, or you're more of a kind of mental, thoughtful person, right, but you want to try more physical things, right? Remember, we use all those different parts of our brain to do those things, right? So, right, because those cognitive engagement, they keep that blood flow to our brain. Those mentally stimulating activities, right, that can improve our cognition, and also engaging in what we call like formal education. So the things that you're enjoying today, right? Anytime you come to these teleconnections, right, you're learning new information. I know a lot of places have like the adult education, right, where you can go to classes where you learn, right, lots of new information. Please, if you're doing them, continue to go. If you haven't learned about those classes or have places like that where you join in, those are great. Those adult education classes, learn new things, continue to learn those things, right? Because it's all that new information that's really challenging your brain, that formal, right? That kind of formal piece to education. Okay? And again, how are we, those activities, right? So what are those hobbies that we might want to do, that we're doing, that maybe we've said we want to try? Don't keep saying, I want to try it, right? Do it, get engaged. What activities sound like fun, right? What topics could you learn more about? Is it in learning an instrument, right? Really looking at that. Really trying those things, right? As a cooking class. I will tell you again, I talked to my mom yesterday. They started going their health clinic that they go to every Tuesday now. My mom says, your dad and I are going to the cooking class today. And I'm like, great. So then they come back and they want to try these recipes for us. But they started this. It's a healthy cooking. And then they also learn these new recipes, right? We're incorporating, which is incredible because it's incorporating healthy eating, plus they're learning new cooking techniques. So it's just amazing. So, right, those new things that you're learning, and they're continuing to do that at 79 years old. So, right, you continue to learn, you continue to challenge yourselves, right? So taking those classes at a community college, right, this a community center, online, right, learning a new language, building a piece of furniture. I don't know. I get those IKEA things. I think we got one desk at IKEA, and oh my gosh, I bought I couldn't do that anymore. So again, learn to play a new strategy game, chess, whatever, right? Those kinds of things that can challenge you. Or they say, right, get to your grandchildren. If you have grandchildren and the neighbor's children, right, all those new games they learn. Oh my gosh, right? Those are some challenging games that are nowadays, even online, right? There's a lot of challenging brain games that you can do, that you can work on, right? And I think the last one is going to be, right, staying connected. right, which you do hopefully, even through virtual. We know that virtual is great. Hopefully you're doing it in person, right? That staying connected to others is so, so beneficial, right? That piece of being with others, I'm just really, right, that stimulation of really, right, even just talking, right? When you're talking to other people, your brain is processing, you're feeling connected to others, right? That's how you can also find friends, right? When you want to go out and you want to do things and you want to exercise, that's how you, right, you find your friends to enjoy other activities to do together, right? Maybe it's, again, finding something to go do physically together, stay involved in your community, volunteering. Alzheimer's Association is a volunteer-led organization. We are always looking for volunteers. There are chapter offices if you are not in our area. San Antonio and South Texas, there are chapter areas and all across the country. We're always looking for volunteers. So, right, if you want to volunteer for organizations, right, clubs, all of those ways to stay connected, right? So again, or schedule phone calls, video chats, right? Visiting with friends, right? Any of those ways that you're keeping that connection. And again, that brain connection of really when you're conversing, right? When you're talking to somebody, when you're engaged, that is right, completely stimulating, making those connections too for your brain. So, right, bringing it all together, right? You can live healthy for your brain and your body in all these areas. And hopefully you can see, right, how it all kind of, right, it's all this full circle, right? They all kind of intertwine. They all affect each other. They can all be beneficial to each other. And so really these 7 areas, there's probably, right, many more you all can think about, but we just really highlight what the science is telling us in these particular areas. And so hopefully we've shared some examples. Hopefully you've had, you jotted down maybe something, really you thought about, it really kind of popped in your head an idea of something either you want to do, or you thought, what, I'm doing these things. And I hope it validated and you really think, you're on the right track and you continue to do these things to keep your brain and your body as healthy as possible. We don't want, again, this disease is devastating. We want to push this off and continue to do this healthy recipe as long as possible until a cure, right, is found. That's the other thing with this kind of movement is, we know we don't have a cure yet, but maybe as we stay healthier for as long as possible, right, until that cure is found, or when there's a diagnosis, that we, people even with this diagnosis, right, continue to do all these still healthy things and keep their brain as healthy as possible, right, even with a diagnosis. We want people, right, to stay as healthy as possible. So I mentioned I'm going to leave you, with our resources. Please, again, if you have any of those questions, I know we're going to do a little Q&A when I'm done. I'll stop sharing. But our 24-hour helpline, we have trained clinicians that answer that line 24 hours a day. So again, please don't hesitate. Again, a commercial comes on, you see something, you're like, is this really helpful? Is this really going to help me? Is this really true on this medication or whatever it is? You can call, they answer, again, 2:00 in the morning, 2:00 in the afternoon. You can call. We have online resources. So if you like to search the web, alz.org. And then we do have what's called a community resource finder. It's a joint page with AARP. So you can find many of our online, in-person, some education programs. So there's a lot of things, and it directly links to AARP. And so there's some things through AARP as well. A lot of those free, AARP has a lot of those free brain games, things on their website for caregivers, all of that as well for resources. So that is, I am going to stop sharing. There's a lot of information I threw at you. I think there are some questions maybe in the chat. So I'm going to stop. And there's Annie. So thank y'all so much, and hope there's anything I can help answer.
This was a great presentation, and we do have a couple of questions.
Sure.
First one came in from Lori. Can you provide more info so we can find details on the pointer study? And thank you.
Absolutely. So yes, if you go to, and I can put it in the chat. So it's really, I was looking at the website here. So I know it's alz.org. And I think if you just go to alz.org and you can search, there's a search engine on alz.org, and you just put in US pointer. and it has all of the background information. So it'll tell you all about, there's some sheets on what the study was, and then it has a nice little graphic. And then it can even lead you to, oh, there it is. See, I knew it had it. So it's alz.org/US pointer. So that's the site. And then it has all the information on there. And then I think it even has a link to the actual journal article, but it's called JAMA, J-A-M-A. So if you're really scientific and you like to read all that good stuff, that's the real like scientific journal it was posted in. And I know they're still doing, they haven't done, that was just the basic baseline results, but they are going to still look at, they did blood work. They did a lot of other things with that group that they're still going to test on. And the neat thing too, though, is they also are going to continue the investigation. So they're going to do another 4-year study with that cohort. So it will continue. But I know that over probably some time, they're going to review whatever blood work and everything that they did with that cohort too, that should be coming out eventually.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start the poll. Please help us improve our program by answering these important questions. This is how we know if you liked our survey, if there's any topics you would like for us to do in the future. Every little bit helps us make this program better. We have another question that says, please give the phone number or email address of who we can check with to see if an over-the-counter supplement I was sold on an infomercial really improves cognitive function.
Sure, and that's going to be that. So our helpline, so you're going to want to call 1-800-272-3900. Yeah, so again, yeah, 1-800-272-3900. And yeah, that's our 24-hour helpline. And absolutely, you can call the clinicians will answer and please say that I bought this. Is there anything you can tell me that it helps for any of that? And they should, they give them all the up-to-date, more than I do. Sometimes I call our helpline, and they usually get all the up-to-date information from our medical science team that says, is this beneficial? Is it not? And they may even recommend too that you talk to your physician, but they should have information on a lot of medications that they might get updated on.
Is awesome. And the last question is maybe a dumb question, but I read that even if you can't hear, you could develop dementia.
So that was interesting. So that was, they were doing studies. I'm sure they're doing more. They were doing studies on the risk of hearing loss and dementia. And yes, I mean, again, I don't know the scientific, but it's, and again, just my thought process, not a scientific, but I think they were looking at the correlation of, obviously, if you're not hearing, right, then you're not processing, right? When you're talking, when you're hearing me, right, your brain is processing everything that I'm saying. So obviously, when you have hearing loss, your brain isn't hearing that, there isn't processing that. So there's probably some things that are going on. And so they were looking at, and also the benefit of looking at like hearing aids, right? Hearing devices that can help you get your hearing back. If you were obviously, right, if you're hearing loss, if you were never, right, if you didn't have hearing to begin with, that's a whole other issue, but, or not an issue because you didn't have hearing. So yes, I mean, I know there were studies looking at that, the benefit of getting hearing aids. And also I will tell you that also looking at if people felt like they were having hearing loss and they were going to the doctor and having hearing tests, sometimes that was also the indicator that they had a dementia, meaning that they were getting the hearing test and they were finding that the organ of the ear was fine. There was nothing wrong with the ear itself. It's that there was the dementia in the brain that was causing the problem, meaning, right, that connection was the problem, not the ear itself. It's the connection in the brain to the ear for the hearing. So again, recommendation is please, go see a doctor if that's the case. If they'll agree to a hearing test to see, is it the mechanism of the ear? Could you get, hearing, aids, or is it something going on with the brain that's affecting the hearing? Yeah.
Thank you for that. She says she's worried for her husband who doesn't use his hearing aids, and I can see he is getting worse.
Yeah, that was like I said, call the helpline. They're ones that they can also give you guidance on how do I have these conversations, right? How do I encourage him, to listen, to wear them. Sometimes, not that it helped. I'm not that it's a great example, but I was like that tough love. I convinced my father. That's how I convinced my father to get his hearing aids. He was stubborn, and I gave him, right. I work for the association. I talked to him about these studies. I said, Dad, you realize that, when you're not hearing, that risk of, and he's got some other risk factors. And so that's really what convinced him to go get hearing aids and wear his hearing aids, because he doesn't want cognitively, he knows his risks. So that's why he wears his hearing aids. So, right, there's ways that maybe they can encourage you to talk to him about it. So call our helpline. They can kind of guide you on those conversations.
And once again, if you registered for this presentation, I had sent out the handouts, but I will be more than happy to send them out again after we are finished. I did post in the chat the link to register for our 2025 Caregiver Summit that's coming up in November. And that is entitled this year, Empowering Caregivers to Thrive. So if you'd like to join us either virtually or in person, go ahead and click on that link and it'll give you some more information. I want to go ahead and say thank you to the Wellman Charitable Foundation for putting these presentations. Yes, they are CEUs for social work and nursing, and you get 2 of them. I want to thank the Walnut Charitable Foundation for sponsoring these classes. I would also, if you'd like to register for any of our upcoming sessions, you can go to our website, which is www.caregiverteleconnection.org. You will find our updated calendar in there and also the upcoming sessions that we have coming up. Dianne, thank you so much for this presentation. Any last words you would like to leave?
No, thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate you all. Please reach out to the association. There's so many more things you can tap into. If you have any questions, we appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me here today.
And with that, thank you, Dianne. Thank you, everybody, for what you do and for joining us in these presentations. And with that, have a great day and hope to see you on the next one. Bye-bye.